Episode 59 of the Hockey Hub. And Adam, we haven't done a show in a year together, or am I being crazy? I don't know, but I feel like it's been a while.
I think you are correct, Hockey Hub wise, because obviously when you came back, you were on pre and post, I was ringside, and so we worked together in that capacity. But in terms of having an actual conversation on this podcast, other than a quick toss to me down on the bench, we haven't done that in a while. No, it's great to be back with you, friend.
It is, Adam, and we over the next hour, as everyone knows, the playoffs are going on. The Bruins in a retool right now, so we kind of just want to go over the roster, the season that was, give our grades. You're going to be giving some grading. I'm going to be commenting on that, and then talking about whether the player exceeded expectations, met expectations, or maybe a little bit under expectations as we kind of go over this Bruins roster that might look very different in a couple of weeks, but we're working with what we know and what we have, and kind of assessing the season at what that was. And let's lead with some breaking news, so to speak. Just earlier this morning on Monday, Mike Sullivan, head coach of the Pittsburgh Penguins, and the Penguins decided to part ways after a decade. And this, we can go in a lot of different directions. First of all, we should probably talk about his tenure with the Penguins and winning percentage and all of the above, 2 Stanley Cups. So resume, and obviously Team USA, there's a lot there. But a lot of teams on the market for a head coach, including the Boston Bruins, as they made that clear, and a lot of different coaches available. So again, a busy, interesting offseason in terms of leadership and what directions team will go. But what did you think when you saw that Mike Sullivan and the Penguins decided to part ways? I personally, I'm not shocked. 3rd consecutive year missing the postseason, a decade. It's a long time, and sometimes a refresh, a new voice is needed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've seen that here in Boston, right? And so that's the case in Pittsburgh. To your point, 3 straight years missing the postseason, and they haven't won a playoff round since 2018, which I actually didn't remember. So it's been a while since the Penguins have not only, made the postseason, but advanced in the postseason. It's been even longer. It seems like a long time ago where they won back-to-back Stanley Cup championships. And so Mike Sullivan, of course, took over in that first season, ended up leading the team to a Stanley Cup. And, this is an interesting name that's now on the board in terms of availability, and there are some other ones as well, with some local ties too, right? Mike Sullivan, obviously a local guy, Peter Laviolette, Greg Cronin, a couple of guys who have Massachusetts ties that are no longer with their respective teams, and so Mike Sullivan is certainly an interesting name, and one that Bruins fans know, not only because he's from Massachusetts, but because he was head coach of the Bruins back in the day. Actually, Andrew Raycroft played for him back in the day, 03-04 season. So, I don't know. I think, if you're looking, it just depends on what the Bruins are looking for, what their criteria is in terms of the next head coach. Is it a veteran like a Mike Sullivan or a Peter Laviolette, or is it an up-and-coming prospect like David Carl? It's a name that we've heard time and time again. The head coach of the World Juniors, head coach of the University of Denver, a national champion. So that they could go either direction there. But we heard Don Sweeney at the end of season press conference. Obviously, that was a question that was asked right out of the gate, right? How's the head coaching search going? Is Joe Sacco still in the mix for that? And Don Sweeney had said that he's had a conversation with Joe, and he is in the mix, and they've begun their background checks, so to speak, right? They do their initial background searches on these coaches, and now that Mike Sullivan is on the board, that's certainly a name that piques some interest around here.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, here's the thing. This storyline we've addressed before in terms of I don't want to say weirdness, but like he's been asked before, like, is it weird if, when you're coaching your son-in-law and Charlie McAvoy, and Charlie McAvoy's been asked about that. And they've both said it's just business as usual and this and that. But those are for shorter term, when we're talking about Team USA, shorter term stints. Full time, Would that, I mean, like we've seen teams, the Winnipeg Jets have had father and son where their son's playing father's head coach. We've seen situations like that happen, but would that play a factor, you think, at all? And of course it's going to be business as usual, but it would be very hard to keep things separate in terms of, personally all the time. Do you think that's going to be a factor at all, as obviously Charlie McAvoy is in transition to be the leader or one of the big leaders, whether he stays as an assistant captain or alternate captain? Is that going to be weird?
I think I agree with you. It will be a factor. It just depends on, each one's comfort level with that, right? And I think there is precedent there, but I think you bring up a good point in terms of Charlie McAvoy's role on the Boston Bruins, right? We're not just talking about a role player. We're talking about one of the leaders on this team, maybe the leader, maybe the captain at some point of the Boston Bruins. So right. That is an interesting dynamic, and I'm sure that's something that is being discussed if Mike Sullivan is, a candidate to be the next head coach of the Boston Bruins. The Bruins, obviously, not the only team in search of a head coach, because of all of these names that are now on the board in terms of availability. I believe that Sullivan's the 9th head coach, to leave his position or part ways, we'll call it, this season. And that includes Jim Montgomery and Drew Bannister, of course, and with Jim Montgomery now at the helm in St. Louis, and Luke Richardson in Chicago, and then some of the other names that we had mentioned earlier, that were just let go from their head coaching position. But, Sullivan's obviously... you mentioned all the years in Pittsburgh, the stint with the Bruins. He was an assistant at a number of different places as well. Assistant, for teams that are now looking for a head coach, like the Rangers, like the Canucks. So, it's going to be interesting. But back to your original question, I'm sure that's something that will be discussed with the player and the head coaching candidate if, in fact, the Bruins are interested in Mike Sullivan. I'm sure that. You asked if it would be weird. Maybe it would be weird at first. Maybe it's enough to preclude them from actually moving forward with it. But I would guess not. I mean, if they really think that Sullivan has all the qualities that they want to be in the next head coach of the Boston Bruins, I'm sure they'll find a way to make it work. And obviously, you want Charlie McAvoy to be on the same page with that, and I'm sure he would be if it's for the best, if it's the best thing for the Boston Bruins. So. I think that, it's an interesting dynamic, but if he's the guy and McAvoy's on board with that, I'm sure that they would find a way to make it work.
And if the answers are like yes, 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 and he's the best candidate and he wants the job and it goes this way, I just hope for both of their sakes, because we know how the media, and that includes us, it's hard to sometimes stay away from beating a dead horse in a storyline, but you'd hope that that story starts, the season off if he gets hired and it goes away. Because if I was McAvoy, I'd be so annoyed by answering the same questions all the time. Was it weird when you were benched or whatever? Because it's your father-in-law. So hopefully that doesn't play a factor in terms of distraction, and that can just be. Get a couple good stories at the beginning and then, call it and make it business as usual. But that's not our decision. That's obviously Don Sweeney and Cam Neely's decision. They talked a little bit about what they were looking for in a head coach. And then I want to discuss Sullivan's coaching style, or just how the NHL, we're calling it kind of the new NHL, in terms of what style and communication and relationships coaches are having with their players. So we'll talk about that a little bit, but let's hear from Don Sweeney at the end of season presser about the kind of coach they're looking for.
I have started it. I've started the background part of criteria, as I referenced, speaking with people that I know will be available, that are currently available, that would be interested. Starting again back to the criteria. Does it have to include NHL experience on a head coaching level? No. It has to include some form of, it should include some form of NHL exposure. But if somebody blows you away, they blow you away. I don't think I'm going to narrow it down to just, I think that's a disjustice to the process. So I'm going to take the process. identify, as I said, the criteria that we have in place and go through it. Similar to last time and similar to where we got down to, 3 candidates in the situation that they've all been head coaches in the National Hockey League. So you feel good about that, and they've had success. The person who comes into this door is going to have success. We're going to set them up for that. We're going to work with them with that. And but having NHL experience is part of that. They don't have to be currently an NHL coach, but exposure to the league is important.
Okay, Don Sweeney talking about that at the end of season presser. Really quick, Adam, before I get your thoughts, I remember being very surprised, and I think a lot of people were when Jim Montgomery was hired. And, what a great story for him. He talked a lot about the tough couple of years he had and the second chance that he had with the Boston Bruins, and look at him now. But assistant coach experience, head coach experience there. I didn't really see that coming. And, Don Sweeney and the team, they may not just be looking at head coaches who are available, but maybe current assistants. And like he said, exposure is important. Maybe it's people we're not necessarily thinking of or that we're not expecting, whereas Mike Sullivan is such a big name and such an obvious choice for so many teams. If the Bruins don't hire him, somebody will. So that's kind of like a more obvious, this could be a good fit. But we know with the Bruins, they have a tendency to, I don't want to say take risks, but they're not always going the mainstream road there. So that's from Don Sweeney. That's my 2 cents on that. Mike Sullivan's coaching style, I've not experienced it. I didn't get to cover him, but from what I understand, it leans a little bit more old school NHL coaching style as opposed to someone like a Spencer Carberry or a Jim Montgomery who had the reputation of being like buddy and friendly with the players and lots of communication, lots of talking to them. I don't know that Mike Sullivan doesn't do that, but I do know that just because of his tenure in the NHL and when he started, there is a little bit of that, I guess, older school mentality, which isn't bad. It's just there's a newer mentality coming out, and both have been proven to be successful. I don't know what the Bruins want or need with their players, but what do you think of his style for what you know of it as a fit with the Bees?
Yeah, it depends on what direction the Bruins are moving forward with, right? And we've heard Bruins front office say that this isn't a rebuild, this is sort of a retool, right? Because you have the parts in place to be successful moving forward, whether it's next year making the postseason or a couple of years making the postseason. And, basically what they want to do is they want to build something sustainable, right? And that's what you heard Don Sweeney and Cam Neely talk about, and Charlie Jacobs as well during their end of season press conference. They want to build something sustainable that can not just be a team that makes the postseason and loses in the first round. They want to build something. Yeah, maybe you make the postseason and lose in the first round next year, but that's sort of a building block for year 2, year 3. And, and the question is, is Mike Sullivan as somebody who could lead that charge? And obviously based on his resume, you would say, yeah, absolutely, making the playoffs 7 out of 10 seasons, winning the Cups, the local experience in Boston. But in terms of coaching style, that's a great question. I know he's certainly used to coaching star power in Pittsburgh, with Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin and Chris Letang and the list goes on. And when they were obviously competing for cups, they had a lot of high profile talent. Boston has that as well, but I think the question would be, if you're in a sort of a retool and you're bringing in some younger players, how would a veteran sort of old school, to use your term, coach like Mike Sullivan do in this environment? And that's a great question. It's a question that I don't have the answer to, but it's something that is certainly being considered when they interview for the next head coach of the Boston Bruins. I would imagine you would want a balance, right? You would want somebody who can sort of fill both buckets, right? Somebody who can be a hard ass, on the players when they need it, right? And we saw that with Jim Montgomery and Brad Marchand on the bench during the road trip, the first road trip of the year in Utah, right? Where Monty gave the captain an earful, and after the game, Marchand said, "Yeah, if he didn't do that, I would be more worried," right? So you want somebody who has the ability to do that, but the other thing, and again, I'm using Jim Montgomery as an example here, because we were talking about maybe guys you didn't expect to be the next head coach, right? It's what you were talking about earlier. He's somebody who is labeled as a good communicator too, right? And so he has that sort of balance where he can give it to the veteran players. He can get he can air them out when he needs to, but he can also be a good communicator as well, and that's important, I would imagine, for younger players, because they're learning the game on the fly at the NHL level, and if you have some young players on your roster like a Mason Lohrei or Matthew Poitras, they need to sort of there's a lot coming at them, right? And yeah, sometimes they need to be aired out, I'm sure, but other times I'm sure they need more of a teacher, right? Somebody in that sort of role. So it's a good question, and it's one that I don't have the answer to, but I can tell you that it is going to be, once the Bruins make their hire, those are the questions that are going to be asked, and that'll be, again, I've used this word interesting a lot, because it's a really unique offseason for the Bruins, right? They're coming off a year in which they didn't make the postseason. They've been to the postseason 8 straight years. They're looking for a head coach. They're looking to fill out their roster, and it's not unprecedented, but it's uncommon. It's rare. So a lot of storylines.
They don't have a captain right now, and I think that's going to be like a really big factor in terms of coaching style. I remember when Jim Montgomery came in, he was like, "Man, I feel so blessed to have Patrice, Marchand, and Pasta and McAvoy as like this crew.
Yeah.
That I can be way more hands off if I need to be. I just trust that they have got it. I can talk to Bergie and Marshy a little bit, and then, pass that message on into the room, et cetera, et cetera." It was very different. Like, everyone talked about how the captaincy and this leadership group in the Boston Bruins over the last decade or so, or since Chara came in, was special, and coaches got to be more hands off, or just have this. It was a unique relationship, and now I'm not saying it's over, because Charlie McAvoy and David Pastrnak were very adamant in the room when we did locker cleanout about how they felt that slipping away this season, and they're doing everything in their power to make sure that they don't lose that. It feels like that is one of their biggest priorities, playing hockey better, but they know it starts within. So that's going to be big, and that's going to be interesting too. Do you want a coach that at the beginning can act, can kind of fill that role as the leader that you're training your younger guys to grow into captaincy and stuff like that? Or what? Or I don't know. Or who do they pick up in the offseason? So like you said, lots of ways this could go, and we don't have those answers, but we will be asking those questions when eventually the new head coach for the Boston Bruins is hired. So hopefully we can get some clarity about the process there. I think we're just speculating. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting. And now to have him as one of the available coaches. And we got to remember too, I don't know how this works, but I'm someone who panics. And I feel like I panic in terms of grabbing onto a situation before someone else does, even if I'm not sure about it. I'm like, oh wait, this might not be an option. I'll take it, even though I don't know. I know Don Sweeney's a lot more regulated than I am, but you got to remember that this goes fast. Someone like him, he's not going to be available all summer. There's going to be a team that's going to want him. So this could move quickly, could not. I guess we'll just have to wait to see.
Absolutely. We'll see how it plays out.
Okay, guys, you are watching the Hockey Hub, as you know. And if you like what you see, you could just follow us all over the place on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and we're also available wherever you get your podcasts, including iHeartMedia, Amazon Music, Spotify, Apple, blah, blah, blah. So just follow us everywhere. I don't know if people subscribe to more than one thing. I'm a one subscription person, Adam. I don't know if you have Yeah. Yeah. Like I'm not, especially for music's, don't tell anyone in terms of the music companies. I would pay $100 a month to have a music app with no commercials. Like that is my number one thing.
Yeah.
YouTube TV, other stuff. I'm not paying for that stuff, but music is where it's at. What about you? Do you have like 1 million subscriptions?
All I know is that I subscribe to all of our Nesson podcasts.
Oh, okay.
That's all I know.
True company guy. Fair. I still got to hit that follow button actually on a couple of things, but
man.
No, I'm kidding. Okay, so we said we were going to transition into like a bit of a grading period, Adam, about the season that was. So let's get into it because I feel like we went a little long on the coaching situation. But let's start with the forwards, and there were a couple standouts. A new addition in Elias Lindholm, David Pastrnak, Morgan Geekie, Pavel Zacha. Where would you like to start? I'll let you pick the first player. Give us your grade, and we'll go from there.
All right, I'm going to start with 88 because he had a terrible season. He was unbelievable. With all the Bruins struggles this year, to have the season that he had was just awesome. So I'm going A++++. Oh, we only got 2 pluses up there? All right, fine. A++. 43 and 63. 106 points. 3 straight 100-point seasons. He's behind Espo and Orr for the most in Bruins history in terms of consecutive 100-point seasons. Most consecutive 40-goal seasons. He's third on that list too. 4 straight now. He's 18th in most goals per game in NHL history. The only active players that are ahead of him are Austin Matthews and Alex Ovechkin. And it's not just the season on the whole, Sophia, and I know we want to get through a number of different players here, so I'll try to keep this as concise as possible. But since January 1st, he was the best player in the National Hockey League. 30 goals, 39 assists, 69 points in 43 games for David Pastrnak. Just an unreal run. Not only the run itself, but under the circumstances in which he was able to do that, right? Because the team was struggling. The uncertainty, the cloud of uncertainty that lingered over the state of the team and the direction and that they were going to go. And then the trades that happen. And for him to still play at a high level, an elite level, was incredible. So A++ for David Pastrnak.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. As you guys know, and obviously as you know, I missed most of the season, and I remember watching a little bit from home and being surprised at the beginning and the outcome. And I know David Pastrnak was getting a little bit of heat for like a slower start, but everyone on the team was struggling in that position. But like you said, after January 1st, just like absolutely went with it. And that's a cool thing to see too, just the going through adversity and like turning your own season around in the way he did, maybe struggling a little bit at the beginning, or, I don't know if there were mistakes at the blue line or, whatever it was with David, but I know that he wasn't happy and the team in general wasn't happy with where they were at. And he just ran away with it. And even after the playoffs kind of seemed to be out of the question, maybe not mathematically eliminated, he didn't slow down. And I don't think it was for himself. I don't think it was like, okay, I really want to reach, this milestone. I think it was just him and his part making sure he, as a leader, showed the younger guys that, like, even though we're out of it, this is how we prepare, this is how we show up, and this is how we're going to play, regardless of whether we're making the postseason or not. This is how we're going to do interviews. I think it was you. It could have been Razor. You can tell me if this sounds familiar. I think he got 2 penalties in a game near the end and really took responsibility for that in first intermission interview. Maybe it was post-game. I can't remember.
Was it a good interview?
It was a great interview. So it was
you, must have been me, yeah.
It must have been you. I can only remember the answers, but whoever asked them got great answers out of David Pastrnak. But it's something we talked about on the show with Jaffe and Barry, that, taking responsibility, not like for his mistakes, which he did. And he just really led by example on and off the ice and didn't slow down. In fact, ramped it up even when the circumstances were dire. So I completely agree. Love to see that. And I saw personally a lot of growth of David Pastrnak in the room as a voice and as a person. So hope, love to see that continue. And it gives, I'm sure, management and fans, hope that in the summer, like this guy isn't an up and down streaky player. He remains consistent. Even if he struggles, he can get out of it. So that's David Pastrnak. I think the natural transition, I was going to go Pavel Zacha, but the natural transition is obviously Morgan Geekie, who I'm assuming has an A in his grade, but let's get it from you first. What did you give him?
First of all, Razor, I love you, buddy. I was just throwing some shade out of love. By the way, yeah, just to put a bow on the Pastrnak conversation, on and off the ice, the growth has been incredible, and it's been fun to watch. So hopefully that continues as the Bruins add pieces, hopefully this summer, to help improve their situation moving forward. All right, Geeks. A. Yeah, no, you're right. No, it can't be anything other than an A. 33 goals, 24 assists this year, both career highs. He got to Boston, and set career highs last year with 17 and 22. He had 22 goals in 180 games before joining the Bruins. That was with the Hurricanes and the Kraken. And, what's he got now? 50 goals in 153 games. And so just incredible growth there. And another guy since January 1st that really stepped it up, 25 goals in the National Hockey League. That was sixth. That was tied for sixth. The only guys ahead of him were David Pastrnak, Alex Ovechkin, Tage Thompson, Jason Robertson, and he was tied with Leon Draisaitl. I mean, that's elite company right there. Absolutely. So Geekie gets an A. And the good news, if you're looking for some good news from that press conference that the Bruins front office and ownership had last week, is that the fact that they're talking about a contract extension. So that's great news moving forward.
And we keep talking about throughout the season, like, leadership core, leadership group. He wasn't really mentioned in it, at least in the conversations I was having. And after coming back to the team and having a lot of one-on-ones with him off camera, or just seeing how he handled scrums, I was like, wait a minute, what about this guy? Yeah, he's young. I think 26, 27, but so are the other guys.
26, yeah.
Yeah, and I think the reason maybe he wasn't talked about much before, and Brick has alluded to this, Charlie McAvoy's alluded to this, it's difficult to be a leader or seen as a leader if your on-ice performance isn't, great. And if you don't have a lot of history, being, like whatever, amazing. And then maybe in your later years, it's dropping off a bit, but like, what it takes to be one of the best of the best. And I guess Morgan never really got there. And now when you're playing super well, and he's very well-spoken, very smart, very intelligent, very personable, if that continues and if the contract is signed, I can very, very much see him as part of this leadership group, and would be very comfortable with him, knowing his character, continuing the traditions that, like, he didn't quite, come in and see it for years, but he knows a little bit about it. So I don't know if you agree, but I think Morgan can definitely be a big part of this leadership group.
He's a really smart guy too,
very
right?
Smart, yeah.
He's a good interview. He's really thoughtful with his answers. And I think, that intelligence, translates on the ice as well. And I think he and David Pastrnak really developed some really good chemistry as they, started to play more together as the season went on. And both guys had talked about getting to know each other and knowing where to be on the ice. And I think that translated into a lot of success. So, the other thing with Morgan Geekie too is he's shown to have some versatility, right? And he came in sort of as a couple of years ago as a guy you thought might be a third line type center maybe, and then ended up on the wing and then moved to center a little bit, and now this year playing on his offside and finding that success. So kudos to him, and I think that speaks to his intelligence, the cerebral part of his game. But yeah, to your point, Sophia, I think he is one of those guys that has the makings of a leader in the room, right? So hopefully they can work out a deal, and he's here for years to come.
Pavel Zacha, I'm going there only because we were going to start with a newer additions a little bit later, or continue the newer additions a little later. But let's go to Zaka,
Okay.
who, yeah, I was going to give my 2 cents, but you were leading, and then I'll follow up. But
Yeah.
what do you think?
B- would be the grade for Pavel Zacha this year. Didn't have a bad year. Didn't have a great year. And I think we had mentioned earlier, and we've talked about it throughout the season, really, about guys who didn't have the same year that they had the season prior, right? And so took a little bit of a dip. Now, Zacha, one of those guys that, he was dealing with an injury, right? As a lot of guys are. And we found out, he had a knee procedure, a minor one. So he's getting that cleaned up. But, he found success with David Pastrnak and Morgan Geekie, and then he got, bumped, to a different line with Casey Middlestat because the Bruins wanted to see what that looked like, and so he moved from center to wing. Another guy who's, versatile, and also it's more than just the goals and assists with Pavel Zacha. He's a 200-foot player, and so he brings more to the table than just filling up the box score in the stat sheet. But he had career highs with the Bruins the last couple of years, and even this season was his third most productive season in the National Hockey League. So he had a B- year in a year where a lot of guys really struggled.
Yeah, I'm just looking up his face-off percentage. So just a little lower than last 2 seasons ago, 54.8, 53.2.
Yeah.
Not bad.
Nope.
I mean, over 50. That's great.
Right.
You want that.
Yep.
But yeah, I would agree. And again, we were talking off camera. Tough for me to give a grade because I missed so much of the season, but just something I felt when I came back was just I think Zacha would have wanted a better year for himself too. It wasn't it just wasn't a standout year for him. He can have a standout year every year, but I'm sure next year, I think he probably wants a little bit more from himself. And like I said, overall, the team's struggling. So I agree with your grade, kind of maybe a little below expectations of what he wanted and what the team wanted from him. And it's nice to know that there's room. He wasn't at his ceiling, and we'll see what he can bring next season. Okay, getting to one of the newer additions, Elias Lindholm, which I think needs no introduction. I think he himself could say it was much below expectations, but you got to be part of that ride all season. What is Lindholm getting?
Yeah, he gets a C, average year, maybe slightly below average in terms of the expectation that was attached to him when the Bruins signed him to the 7-year, $54.25 million deal, right? And you remember, you go back to that to last offseason, the Bruins, what did they need to address? Well, they needed to address, the centerman play down the middle after the loss to the Panthers in the playoffs, and they needed to get more physical, and they addressed that. And I know we'll talk about some of the other players coming up, but in terms of Lindholm, there were high expectations. This is a player that you wanted to be your number one center and play alongside David Pastrnak and Brad Marchand, we found out at the end of season player availability that he was dealing with a back injury. And that back injury went all the way back to August before training camp even started. And we knew that he was hobbled a little bit in training camp, and like many other players, had a disjointed training camp. And so he got out of the gate slow and never really found his offensive game. And so what was encouraging, if you're looking ahead to next season, Sophia, is the fact that, he started to pick it up a little bit, right? And so you look at the final numbers, 17 goals, 30 assists. It's more than he had between the Flames and Canucks last year. Ended up playing all 82 games, so it shows you a little bit of the toughness there. And despite being hurt, 9 points, four goals, 5 assists over the last 9 games, 55.2% in the faceoff circle. And again, he's a 200-foot player, a cerebral player, so a lot of what he does doesn't show up on the stat sheet. But in terms of the expectation, the performance relative to the expectation, it was below average.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm going to comment a little bit about having a first year with a new team and a new city and all that. Okay, there are a ton of – this happens all the time. It's part of the business. Players get traded. They have to move their families, uproot them. And so many of them, you might not remember that that's happening behind the scenes because they are playing so well, or maybe they are, at where they're supposed to be in terms of expectation. But that does play such a big factor. And it was a weird training camp, which is what Don Sweeney mentioned. He wasn't happy with the training camp and how it started. And obviously he missed some of that. Like, fine, you don't want to believe that a tough training camp / an injury at the start of the season can derail an entire season for you. But sometimes it can, and there were so many other factors that we saw that can add up. But I'd like to add that I think anytime you're in a second year of a home that you're building with a family is going to be a whole lot easier. There's just, as someone who moved myself, that first year was a whirlwind. It was so fun. And maybe no one's noticing the little things that I do in my job in front of the camera that I feel like I'm like, oh my God, I was so rattled, or I, didn't have enough time to prepare. There's just so much settling that happens after you've had a full season and a full year with a new team or organization or city. So that in itself, I'm hoping will just not be a distraction or whatever the word you want to use, but he'll just be coming in and being able to be, pick up where he left off. And I kind of want to slightly chirp Billy and Barry because jokingly but not, I remember, I don't know when it was, it must have been March, but I think Elias Lindholm was starting to score again, and he had point streak or consecutive games with a point. And I said to them, I don't know if it matters, but do you think ending on a high note for Elias Lindholm, because the gap's going to be 4 or 5 months before the first game versus the last game of the season, is that too long of a gap for it to matter? And they're like, it doesn't matter that he ends on a high streak. He's going to forget it by the time next season starts. And then he kept picking up points. And I can't remember, I don't know if you have it, I don't have it, but the amount of points he had in the last 10, 15 games. But it obviously was a significant jump. He was kind of stuck, not producing, and then he kind of picked it up. And then the guys on the desk were like, this is going to be great for him going into the offseason. This is going to really matter. And I was like, wait a minute. I asked you that a couple of weeks ago, and you said no. So I'm just calling them out a little bit about that. But I do think, even though it's not where he wanted, I think getting that little momentum for 10 games does give a player something in the summer. So I'm hoping he can build something off of that.
9 points over the last 9 games. It was the month of April where he really started to pick things up. And just to, support your argument, Brick believes the same thing, right? And we've talked about that on this podcast, where he believes that individual success of a player can carry over into the following year in terms of building confidence into the offseason, not necessarily team success, right? So if the team goes on an 8-game winning streak, towards the end of the year, that success doesn't carry over into the following year. It's more about the individual. And so Elias Lindholm, hopefully that can be a springboard for success going into the offseason and then into next season.
Totally agree. Okay, we're going to dive into a couple more players, but I'm going to take the time. I think, Adam, you were supposed to do this promo, but I'm just getting it in.
Am
here,
I?
Okay. Do you want to read it?
Which one is it?
Boston has entered the chat.
I would love to.
Okay, you take it away.
For the biggest trending news in the sports world, check out Boston Has Entered the Chat, hosted by George Bellecci, Travis Thomas, and Casey Hudson. Available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and wherever else podcasts are found.
You do a way better job than me. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, we do the promos on Nesson, right? I do them pretty regularly. So I'm usually like, tonight, the Bruins in action, TD Garden. So that's my promo voice.
You have a great broadcast voice. When I read promos, it sounds like I'm seeing the English language for the first time. It's like what? But I think you can find it anywhere you want. Sure, whatever you do. That's how I.
Did you have what did you have earlier? You said something like blah 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 or something.
I did. I said find it on Spotify, YouTube, blah blah blah.
Blah blah blah.
Blah blah blah.
Way to really punch it.
Oh God,
That's
it's
so
just
funny.
I hate sounding like I'm reading, even though we do read a lot. Side note, divert here quickly. We do have to read a lot, guys and girls watching this. Adam and I, obviously we like to have conversations with the panelists, but sometimes we have these random promos or reads that we got to get in, but I hate sounding like I'm doing it. So then I try to ad lib, and then that makes it even worse. Then it's just a train wreck. So far, still have my job though.
Yeah. Yes, that's good.
No one seems to notice. Okay, so we got some of the bigger names out of the way. I might struggle a little bit with I got to have like last season as a reference for some of these guys, but some of the newer players, you spent more time with them and got to watch them up close. Okay. Can I give you Mark Sullivan, and can I get his grade?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, when you say new players, I mean, he's a veteran Bruin a long tenured Bruin compared to some of the guys on the roster, right? Because we saw some call-ups in Providence, and obviously the trade deadline happened. But yeah, Sullivan, speaking of trades, last year, that was the big trade with Linus Ullmark, and the big topic of conversation at the time is Jonas Korpisalo. And not a lot of mention of Mark Sullivan. And then when training camp started and the preseason started, and we saw him in action in preseason games, and we saw what kind of player he was, it's like, oh, he's going to fit in just nicely, right? Because of the physicality, and laid some big hits, sort of set the groundwork, and was a preview of things to come in terms of the type of player he was. The only thing, obviously this year he's, he dealt with a concussion, and it's something that he talked about at the end, the locker clean out days. That's something that he had never experienced before. He ended up playing just 61 games, had the 5 goals and the 9 assists. Got out of the gates really strong. In fact, that fourth line as a whole was unbelievable at the beginning of the season, really keeping them afloat in some ways. The combination of Johnny Beecher, Cole Koepke, and Mark Sullivan, that was the fourth line to start the year. But Sullivan himself brought the physicality, ended up being second on the team in hits, trailing only Nikita Zadorov. He had 218 hits, and he did it in 61 games. So it just shows you what kind of player he is. The grade for Sullivan's a B+. A B+. I think that's a solid number. It's a player that flew under people's radar when he got traded to Boston because all the focus was on Korpisalo. Sullivan had a great year, and he got the 3-year contract extension, which was great. He is a hard-working, quintessential Bruins player.
Mm-hmm. No, I got to know him just a little bit when I came back with the team, and character-wise, I really enjoyed him, and I would agree that like the quintessential Bruins player definitely suits him, and like you said, veteran, so to speak, compared to some of the newer guys.
Yeah, long-tenured Bruin.
Long-tenured, exactly. But no, I really enjoyed him, and you gave him a B+? Yeah, B+. I would agree, and I like his character, and I like his identity and how he plays for this team. So solid overall for Mark Sullivan. Great guy too.
Yep.
Okay, we're gonna keep going. I'm kind of setting you up. Are you cool with that, or did you want me to take in a certain direction? Because we're definitely, by the way, guys and girls, we're not getting to the defensemen or goalies because we've dragged this out. So we're just doing forwards, and we'll do defensemen and goalies at the next episode.
And maybe the young players too, probably, right? We might not even have time to get through all those.
Yeah,
so, all right.
We won't get to a Lysell, I don't think, or some of the guys fired at the deadline. But can I keep going, or do you want to talk about someone specific?
No, set me up. Let's go.
Okay, let's do Vinny Lettieri.
Vinny Lettieri. Okay. Vinny Lettieri gets a C+.
Okay.
And it's hard, right? And that might seem like a harsh mark for a guy who sort of was up and down from Providence, got called up, situation with the Bruins after the trade deadline, playing with so many different players. That might be sort of a harsh grade, but I wanted to see a little bit more offense out of him because he's got such a great shot. He's got an absolute missile of a shot, and I was hoping that would translate into some more offensive production, especially considering the numbers that he posted down in Providence this year.
Yes.
And again, I know that's not a perfect science, right? But I mean, he had 21 and 29 in 47 games with the P Bruins, 50 points in 47 games, just 3 goals and 2 assists in 26 games with Boston. His second stint with the Bruins, I wanted to see just a little bit more, but and it was fun for a while when they had the all Minnesota line working together with Cole Koepke, Casey Middlestat, and Vinny Lettieri. A C plus for Lettieri. Probably, if I had to do it again, maybe a B minus.
Okay, very fair. Yeah, I was just looking up his Providence numbers. It's so funny how, like you said, it's definitely not a perfect science. I wonder what that feels like as a player too, which, would be a good question to ask. But when you're, 50 points in whatever it was, 47 games or something like that.
Yeah.
Like a point per game player. And the AHL is extremely competitive, as we know. It's great hockey. And then you come up to the NHL and maybe you're expecting more from yourself. And I know they know that it's a completely different game, but that would be hard. It's hard. It's like, when you're squeezing the stick and it's not coming in the same way. And as you mentioned, those points don't translate into NHL skill or talent or pace or game or anything like that. But when it's that stark of a difference, I'm sure it's frustrating for the player. And maybe they expected a little bit more from themselves, but that's just the way it is. You mentioned one of his lineys for a little bit. Let's talk about Cole Koepke.
Sure. I would love to talk about Cole Koepke. He gets an A minus.
Okay.
This was a player that I don't think anybody thought would be on the roster. I mean, coming out of training camp, he had a great camp. And it was, I think it was a question at the time whether or not it would be Tyler Johnson or Cole Koepke, right? Or maybe Matt Poitras, because Poitras dealt with the injury at the end of the preseason and it was on the shelf. And so Cole Koepke got an opportunity and they made the most of it. And I mentioned earlier, in the beginning of the season seems like 10 years ago, but that fourth line was buzzing, man. They were all like plus 10, they were all leading the league in plus minus. It was like the top 3 forwards in the year. It was like Kaslik, Beecher, Koepke, and plus minus. They were off and running, but this is a player, who finished with 10 goals and 7 assists in 73 games. You look at those numbers relative to what he had going into this season. I think he only had 2 career goals, maybe 1 career goal, whatever it was, 20 something NHL games of experience, and to be able to hang for 73 games. Really impressive, and one of only 3 forwards who played a full season not to have a minus rating. So Cole Koepke, great story, really good season.
Yeah, I just pulled it up really quick, as you said. So 10 goals, 17 points with the Bruins this season, and then career, 99 games, 11 goals, 9
the 1 goal,
assists.
right?
Yeah, so 20 points and 17. So 3 of them before joining the Boston Bruins, and 17 this season with him in 73 games. And as you said, a +1. So I would agree. That's a great rating for him. Didn't know what to expect, what we were going to get. And as you mentioned, making, the team out of training camp. So good for Cole, and we'll see where that leads. Johnny Beecher had some NHL Bruins experience prior to the season. Where would you rate his?
Yeah, I gave, this is a tough one too. I gave him a C, only because I wanted to see more. After last season, he had the 7 goals, 3 assists in 52 games this year, just 3 goals, 8 assists in 78 games this year. Was part of that fourth line that was getting the job done, and I know he's tasked with a lot of defensive zone draws as well. But he's got such great speed. He's a great skater, and you want to see more out of a player like that, in terms of maybe more offensive production. And I know he also was dealing with a little bit of an injury, and he's an RFA too. So, and he's still, again, this was just year 2 in the National Hockey League, so might be a harsh grade, but because of the potential, because, I think there's more there. For Johnny Beecher, and we might see that next year in a Bruins sweater. That's why I gave him the grade he got.
Okay, and we're going to wrap up. We have a little bit more time, but do you have a grade for Matt Poitras?
Yeah, it's an NA, not available, not applicable, incomplete. However you want to categorize that, just because we didn't see enough of him. He had nobody expected him to make the team out of training camp, the season before this past one. He has the shoulder injury, season-ending shoulder injury, and then surgery, training camp, preseason. He's getting caught up and then gets hurt in the final preseason game. It was, you want to talk about disjointed. It was disjointed for Matt Poitras out of the gate, and then he goes down to Providence, comes back up, and then he goes down to Providence to stay. I mean, he's only 20 years old. He's got more time to develop. He did it in Providence, and hopefully comes into training camp, next year with sort of that experience helping him, especially with a playoff run, right? That in the AHL, they made the playoffs. Some guys are getting some good postseason experience there. Hopefully, it helps Matt Poitras.
I hope so too. And injuries stink, it's crazy. Not saying that without them that he would be an NHL superstar, but obviously it was very fun to watch him in preseason a couple of years ago, and even in the NHL, playmaking ability. Small guy, as you know, very, very small right now. Definitely can put on some weight, and I know he's working on that. But young, inexperienced, and he seemed pretty confident on the ice, on NHL ice. But injuries can do a number for you, and like you said, the postseason in the AHL is going to be very beneficial for him. So we'll see about Matty Poitras. But I'm not surprised, Adam, that we need another show to wrap up the grades, because we really got into it in the weeds, kind of did a full circle, wrapped up the forwards, but we're going to talk defense and goalies, and maybe some of the newer guys in the next show. And
Sounds good.
maybe even grade some of our broadcasters like Billy. I'd love Billy, you, Razor, maybe me, some of my postseason interviews. Maybe, I don't know.
Or the whole show could blow up because they've hired the next head coach.
Or that. Yeah, I guess we'll wait and see. But already the news is getting exciting. I know we got to wrap, but I know it's a sad off season, but also an exciting one for the Boston Bruins. So, Adam, this was fun. I don't know when we're doing our next show. I think Wednesday, I guess. So
yeah, I'm back. Hey.
I think so. Talk to you Wednesday, and guys, we'll see you on the next Hockey Hub. Thanks for listening.